Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, America's #1 trusted resource for realtors who demand authentic, real-time coaching. Starring award-winning real estate coaches Tim and Julie Harris. Get ready for unfiltered, full-strength honesty about what is truly working to get you into action and make you money in this new real estate boom. Now to our hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Welcome back to Real Estate Coaching Radio. Hopefully your week is off to a fantastic start. Julie, lots of fantastic coaching calls this week, obviously already. Lots of great reports back from all of our coaches about the incredible start to the year that our coaching clients are experiencing. And I have to say, it is straight up impossible not to feel motivated after talking to so many agents that are not just meeting, but absolutely blowing away the goals that they set for themselves. All right, so what we're going to be focusing on today is, by the way, guys, this week we're having a lot of great interviews. I think we've got an interview scheduled for Thursday and an interview scheduled for Friday. And Julie and I spent a good part of the weekend writing outlines for the radio shows for the next couple of weeks. A lot of great stuff that we haven't talked about before. A lot of, it's interesting, listeners. Julie and I were reading Psychology Today, which is, I don't think any of you will be surprised that Julie and I are avid readers of. And I came across something before we get to today's topic. Julie, by the way, what is today's topic for the radio show?
Today's topic is, are you ahead, are you behind, or are you on track, and how to keep yourself in momentum.
So one of the articles in Psychology Today was talking about the fact, is there a midlife crisis? Yeah, sure, I'll admit it. I was probably interested in reading that topic because Julie and I both had birthdays, and we're certainly falling into the age bracket where people sometimes claim to have midlife crisis. But here's the bottom line from the report, from the article. You guys should read it if you haven't. Number one, midlife crisis is a bit of a myth. In other words, it's a cultural thing more than it is a physiological thing. So there's no reason that anyone in their 40s or their 50s, should be experiencing anything unusual. As a matter of fact, the article actually went into talking about the fact that most people in their quote-unquote midlife have a tendency to be happier, more content, more financially secure. So it's kind of just the opposite of what a lot of the cultural norms are, sort of, I think, the pop culture beliefs are about people in midlife. But one thing I did think was very interesting, and I thought you guys will all appreciate it as well, is it talked about basically how up until about, say, 50 years old, most people will spend their time differently and how they look at their expectations of life and for themselves differently than after 50. So after 50, it's almost like they feel like it's an abundance versus scarcity mentality. So after 50, they're feeling like there's a scarcity of time. In other words, they don't have a lot of time left. Again, this is Psychology Today, and I'm sure some of you at differing levels have experienced this or will experience this depending on your age. So at 50, late 40s, 50s, all of a sudden you start looking at life in terms of what time do I have left, and should I really be trying to achieve those big goals, and should I maybe let go of a lot of the goals and expectations I had for myself? Should I just maybe forget some of the true things that were driving me when I was younger? So in other words, they start to choose to be complacent. They start to choose to no longer think big. They start to allow themselves to be lulled into this false sense of security. And of course, everyone knows, or at least listeners know, that there is no such thing as being complacent at the end of the day. Complacency implies that you're going to stay the same, and you can't stay the same. It's physically impossible. Our entire bodies, everything around us right now is in a state of change. And if you mentally and emotionally decide that you're going to try to stay put, what happens essentially is you lose what you have, so you actually slide backwards. Put that aside. So what happens again in midlife is that a lot of folks start to give up on their goals, give up on their dreams. They start to expect less out of life. Whereas when you're younger, you have all these, I can do anything, or for the most part, I'm going to travel to Europe, I'm going to do, I'm a whatever, right? So you have these big dreams, big hopes, and then there's this little teetering that happens at, differing ages where people start to sort of let go on their expectations for life. And as a coach, we help folks overcome that. It's something we see all the time. It's very common. It's very normal, and it happens without people knowing it, where you'll start having a coaching call with someone, and you'll realize that they really are starting to give up on the things that they aspired to when they were younger. And sometimes you ask a potential client or a coaching client if they can take themselves back in time 20 years, what were they thinking of? What were they dreaming of? Where were they hoping they would be at this point in their lives? It's always interesting what happens in those kinds of conversations, and you guys should think about your own answer. Are you where you hoped you'd be? Are you where you wanted to be in life at this point? And if not, have you just given up on the idea that you would accomplish those particular goals? Or are you totally and completely motivated and totally completely focused? See, that was the flip side, according to Psychology Today, that article, is they said some people, what they'll do is they'll realize, I don't have necessarily as much time on the planet that I did before, and so I'm going to double down on my goals. I'm going to refocus myself on what my ambitions are. I'm not just going to spend a week in Europe. I'm going to spend a month in Europe or half a year in Europe. So there's a certain percentage of folks that as time passes, they give up. As time passes, other folks will re-engage and even take it to a different level. And you know what? What really got my mind working is when Julie proposed the topic for today's radio show, essentially talking about your business plan, looking at your first quarter. And some of you are on track, right? A lot of you are on track for what your expectation is for yourself for this year for your business. Others of you are, let's just be honest, just getting ready to get started. You haven't really built any momentum. You don't know what you're doing. You're kind of like a rudderless ship in the middle of the sea. You are lost with no direction. And then others, many of our personal coaching clients are not just meeting, but they're absolutely annihilating their goals. And for those of you who are in that category, it's time for you to maybe think about resetting your goals and setting your goals higher. The vacation house on the lake that you were going to buy in second quarter of 2016, let's move that up to third quarter of 2015. The rental house that you were going to buy fourth quarter of this year, let's buy that now. You guys get the point? So you got to keep the momentum going by increasing the expectations you have for yourself. Realize that in many cases, because we're at the very beginning stages of a real estate boom, a lot of you are setting your own personal goals on a benchmark that's no longer valid. You're still thinking like it's a recession. You're still thinking in scarcity opposed to thinking in abundance. So if you were to remove the shackles that that are self-imposed, by the way, and you were to release the inner, this person you were 20 years ago, and you were to start looking at life from a perspective of all that is possible opposed to all that was possible, where does your mindset go? So let's start on a very micro-focused approach to this thought, and let's look where you are in your business right now, looking back on fourth quarter. Yes, I know. I'm sorry, looking back on first quarter. Yes, I realize we still have some days left here in March. And then let's make a plan together how you guys can then take where you are, continue to build momentum, or start building momentum, depending on where you are on the where you are on that spectrum, and make this the best year of your life. Hey, guess what, guys? When you make it the best year of your life professionally, have you noticed that translates into everything else in your life? Your personal life is better. Of course, your financial life is better. You're going to have your best year ever because you've really been able to focus on education, the categories of life. Students, I know you know what the boxes I was just checking there. By focusing primarily by being at work when you're at work, focusing on your financial goals, re-engaging that 20-year-old self or that person that you were before, and you're really, when you were willing to think big, when you didn't believe or accept your self-imposed limitations, when you looked at life from an abundant perspective opposed to scarcity perspective, when you get back to that mental and emotional state, that's exciting. That's the whole reason you decided to get into real estate yourself. So, Julie, let's go ahead and let's just drill down on the points that you wrote down. So and guys, take notes because Julie's going to go relatively quick.
Yes, perfect. So how do you know if you're on track, you're behind, or you're actually ahead? Most of our coaching clients are on track or ahead. If you're not, that's okay. Now's the time to do something about it before the year slips away. So what we're going to do now, you can use any quarter, not just first quarter, not just last quarter. You should be doing this regularly, and our coaches do this regularly with you so that we get in front of this. And if you need to recalibrate your goals and do things faster, well, we're going to do it. If we need to recalibrate and say, hey, gosh, what happened? Were you hibernating all of first quarter or what? That's why we do this. So the numbers don't lie, so we do the numbers first. Year-to-date closed transactions. Now, some of you guys go right into, well, it closed in January, but I wrote it in December. I don't care. If it closed in this year, you count it. So don't get overcomplicated and over-analytical. Year-to-date closed. Then you do your year-to-date pending, and we're talking both listing and buyer sides. If you did, double-dip some stuff, you count one buyer, one listing. If you got paid on it, it counts. So year-to-date closed, year-to-date pending, and then we've got total active listings who are have-to-sell sellers, and we've got total active buyers, which are a little bit slightly less valuable, as we've talked about in the past. No buyer actually has to buy, but some of them are going to buy. based on being in buyer agency contracts with you, having their pre-approval or all cash, being motivated and responsive. So we look at all of those things together, Tim. Most agents will say, well, I've only closed this, so I feel like I'm not on track. Well, if we add your pendings and we add your pipeline, that really shows you what's going on this quarter. So let's say that you had a goal of doing 60 deals or 15 per quarter. Maybe you've only closed 3, but if we looked at your pending and we looked at your pipeline of listings and buyers, particularly active listings who have to sell, extra bonus points for those, well, maybe you're more on track than you thought you were based on what you've already produced into the pipeline. Now, obviously, 15 actually closed puts you ahead this early in the game, and then you add your pendings to that. But at least this is a snapshot in time. How are you doing? You know, Tim, we just did that call on vital statistics. And this is a version of that. We're just taking a bigger chunk of time. Our vital statistics form that we use with our clients, well, that's a weekly reporting. This is taking an entire quarter and saying, how'd you do? What's going on here? So the numbers don't lie, and that's why we start with the numbers. Tim, what's your experience been when you get into the numbers with your clients at this point in the year? What are you finding when we do the nitty-gritty numbers part of this?
Well, the number one thing is that that's a great question, because the answer is that they're always ahead of where they think. At least that's consistently the experience that we've been having, obviously with our own personal clients, but also with our coaches and their clients. A lot of the agents that just started with us, they may be not experiencing that, but they will soon. When you guys are doing this exercise, make sure you take into account the number of listings that you have, as Julie said, that are sellable listings, and that'll give you a true reflection of what you've generated first quarter. That's where you start to see the reality of your efforts. And this is always a constant reminder that the pay cycle in real estate is longer than you think, right? I mean, so the contact you make today gets you paid in 90 days, 120 days, maybe longer. So if you stay in connection with that, you will always be exceeding your goals, because you'll, frankly, force yourself to always stay focused on what matters most every single day, which is, of course, the lead generation, the lead follow-up, the going on appointments, the pre-qualifying, all that good stuff that we teach you guys. So staying focused on those things primarily every single day will definitely keep you on target, if not exceeding your goal for the entire year.
That's right. So then we move on to kind of a first quarter, or whatever quarter you're using this in. Again, you can do this. That doesn't have to be a specific time frame, and you don't have to really be at the end of a quarter. You can take a 90-day chunk that you just completed and look at these numbers. So once you have the real numbers, then you're going to ask yourself, what are the 3 things I did really well this quarter? Some of you guys are going to be hard-pressed to choose only 3. Others of you are real good at beating up on yourselves and think, well, I wasn't exactly on track, and I'm terrible at this, and I'm terrible at that, and I'm off track, and I'm disorganized, and all this stuff. Well, so all of you, whether that's your mindset right now as you feel kind of disconnected, or you're somebody that can hardly even whittle it down to 3 great things I've implemented, just choose the 3 best things that you did this quarter. Common answers I get, Tim, are I cleaned up my lead follow-up. I now can say without a shadow of a doubt that I am the world's best lead follower-upper, at least in my marketplace. Nothing slips through my fingers anymore. That's a huge best thing. And then, of course, we say, what's it going to take for you to continue doing that? Well, I always get a funny answer on that. I think you do too. They say, I have to answer the damn phone. So there's
Exactly.
lead follow-up to your voicemail, but you'll have less lead follow-up if you just answer the phone. So that's a common answer. Other best things, getting the pre-listing package done. That's huge. 3 best things, I am becoming a better closer. I'm actually asking for the business more frequently. But there can be things that don't seem as obvious as those. It could just be following the coaching from the Miracle Morning. You're actually getting up at the same time every day. You're actually controlling your morning instead of just kind of praying and hoping your way through that you won't have fires to put out and being reactive. So what are the 3 things? And maybe all of you guys that are listening right now, you can take a second and write down, just off the top of your head, what are 3 things you did really well in the past 90 days? And then the follow-up question again is, what do you need to do to continue being great at those 3 things? Because it's not unusual in coaching, we'll ask you, where's your business come from in the past? And we'll get an answer like, well, it used to come from here, but I got away from doing that. Well, what caused that? Well, I got busy. And then you never went back to it. Some of you guys, every time you talk to your past clients, you get leads, but as soon as you get busy, you stop talking to them. So what are the things that will keep you doing the things that you're great at? Not just I'm really great at those things when I'm not busy. That's not a system. That's what a hobbyist does. So what do you need to do to continue being great at those three things? Maybe that's get an accountability partner. Maybe it's hire a coach to make sure that you're being accountable and to keep you in those habits. So Tim, what do you typically hear when you ask, what's it going to take to keep you doing those things that have been so effective over the past 90 days?
Well, it comes down to two things, right? Doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level. I had someone, of course we say that all the time, and I had, you can tell when someone gets it versus when they don't. And, it goes back to the whole Chinese proverb of when a lesson is to be learned, a teacher will arise. And the answer to most of your questions are doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level. You guys should write that down. You might not be ready for that lesson, but the bottom line is the cure-all for virtually everything that slows you down in your real estate practice is that, doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level. You guys got to remember that, because the question that the student asked me was, how do I feel like doing what I'm supposed to do every day? Lead generation, lead follow-up, going on appointments. He was saying that I don't feel like actually doing this type of work on a regular basis. And I had to tell him the truth. And the truth is nobody does. The fact is that, I used a real personal example. I said, on any given day of the 20 days a month where I prospect, I do coaching calls, or even when I did prospect, by the way, how many of those days did I actually feel like doing it? Or how many of those days do I actually wake up in the morning and say, hoo-hoo, I have coaching calls today? And he said, well, Tim, you're really good at it. I mean, you're something I always feel like, you're leaving it all in the field with me. And when we're on our coaching calls, I said, well, guess what? Of the 20 days a month on average that I coach, I probably only feel like doing it maybe one. The others, trust me when I tell you, there's something else I'd rather be doing. And he was really surprised. I think maybe shocked when I said it that way, but it's the truth. Now, how is it that I and you and everyone else who gets this will be able to perform consistently year in and year out, even when they don't feel like it? The answer is getting into action. So actually doing it, actually getting on the phone, actually doing the lead follow-up, actually doing the presenting, doing the work aspect of what you do, we'll make it so your feelings will follow. You see, guys, your feelings will ultimately betray you. If you're waiting to feel a certain way before you actually get into action, you're never going to get into action. Using the example I gave this coaching client that I'm sharing with you guys. If I only did a great job coaching on the one day of the month where I actually feel like doing it, well, we wouldn't be where we are in our careers. We wouldn't have one of the fastest growing coaching organizations. We wouldn't have the number one real estate radio show specifically for agents with over 100,000 listeners. We wouldn't get it. So I don't wait around to personally feel a certain way before I do it. I get into action because I know my feelings will follow. And you guys, it's the exact same way with everything in life, not just work. With everything in life, get into action and the feelings will follow. If you can accept that and tail in that with, long-term, ever-improving success is about doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level, those two thoughts together, if there's a secret, Julie, I think, if you have anything to add to this, I'm curious, but if there's a secret, that's it, those two thoughts.
Well, it is, and not letting yourself really have the option of having your emotions and whether you feel like doing it or not even come into play in your business. If you were working at a, quote, real job, it wouldn't even cross your mind if you felt like showing up to work. You would get fired if you just decided to only show up when you feel like it. But in real estate, we get away with too much. So I think if you eliminate the possibility of allowing your emotions to run your business, and you train yourself away from only getting cracking in your real estate practice when you feel like it, miraculously you will absolutely make more money, and you'll be building a really strong long-term habit. And doing that on a daily basis, that could make your inevitable retirement from the business 10 years, 15 years earlier. You could have all that rental property 5, 10 years earlier than you had planned just because you decided to work even if you don't feel like working. It affects everything. But the problem is, Tim, that it takes so long to see the effects of feeling like it or not feeling like it. If there are agents, I guarantee you right now, that are listening to this radio show deciding whether to crawl out of bed or not. And more power to you for at least having the radio show on. But nothing immediately right the second bad happens to you as it would if you had a, quote, real job, right? And because it's 30, 60, 90 days before you feel the effects of not feeling like working today, that works against you. So eliminate that even as a possibility. It doesn't even cross your mind. You know that you follow your daily dollar productive schedule as we coach you through the treasure map and with your coaches, that when you do that, you are incrementally moving towards the goal, if not exceeding it. So, yeah, take action and the emotions will follow instead of how most people run their lives, deciding how they feel today and then what actions might match that feeling. One way is more possible than the other.
One of the things that stymies a lot of these guys is they just, for whatever reason, they choose not to think very big. So they just don't, they feel like they're, again, going back to the ship without any direction. That's what they feel like. So when you say a 5-year goal, for a lot of people, that's way too far out. That's just ridiculously, can't imagine that. So if you guys can start working on short-term goals, remember one of the things that we know from Navy SEALs is if you just focus on your 3-foot world, just focus what's around you immediately. That means you have to be present in what you're doing to make it kind of spiritual. That's the key. If you're present listening to this radio show right now, if you're, in other words, you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, you're not thinking about what else you have to do, you're not being distracted by all your electronic devices, you're just present. You're present with our voices, you're present with your thoughts that are coming as a result of what you're hearing us say, you're thinking about it, you're actually starting to get the fact that doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it is what you've been avoiding. So when you get to that point, you transcend a lot of the things that have been holding you back. You transcend a lot of the beliefs, a lot of the myths that you've had about yourself. Going back to the top of the radio show, you transcend the belief that you don't have more time in your life to accomplish all the things that you wanted to accomplish. You go back to thinking like you did when you were younger. You go back to believing that you can accomplish anything. Guys, here's a little unknown fact, or a little, I don't think it's a very popular fact, is that most people don't achieve their greatest financial successes until they're in their 50s and 60s. Another book I was reading recently talked about when most people become billionaires. I mean, granted, there's not a lot of billionaires, but when most of them became billionaires, if I were to ask you guys that question, 100,000 of you will answer, most people, Tim, become billionaires when they're in 20 and their 30s, right? Because that's what our popular culture celebrates, but it's not true. Same with millionaires, by the way. Most people do not become millionaires, let alone billionaires, until they're at the later stages of their working careers in their 50s and 60s. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So those of you who have decided that you're not going to quite be as motivated, who you're just going to slightly give up on what your expectations are for yourself and for your life, you maybe want to think about the fact that most people never achieve their greatest financial successes until they're in their 50s and 60s. Doesn't it make sense that those are the same people that I was describing at the top of the show, the ones that said, yes, maybe I don't have as many days ahead of me as I did when I was in my 20s or my whatever, but the reality of it is the time that I have left, I'm going to take so much more seriously than the time I did in my misspent youth. Does that resonate with you? If it does, then you need to embrace the fact that doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level is the key, along with not waiting to feel like doing it. So, Julie, what are the other points they need to be taking into consideration when they're deciding what direction they need to go specifically with their business planning?
Sure. So we were just talking about continuing to do the 3 things that you identified over the past 90 days that you're doing well. Make sure you don't lose those habits. And then we move on to 3 things that you need to improve, implement, or polish over the coming 90 days. So again, 3 things you need to improve, implement, or polish the coming quarter. And maybe what you were just talking about is one of them. Stop letting the emotions control your business. Well, we spent a lot of time talking about that. How do you actually do something about that? Well, you actually follow your schedule. You actually follow miracle morning thinking. You actually control your time. It starts with stop hitting the snooze button. That's where it begins, right? So 3 things you can improve, implement, or polish. Maybe that is your listing presentation itself. That's a pretty big project, and maybe that's the only thing that you're super focused on over the next 90 days. Polishing your presentation, making sure you know how to present everything in it, objection handling, closing, all of those great things. So what are the 3 things you need to improve, implement, or polish over the next quarter? If you're not sure, talk to your coach, and they'll help you figure that out. And then the question is, all right, I've identified those things, Tim, but what would stand in my way? Why have I maybe not polished or implemented those things in the past? What stands in my way? And the most common answers is I get busy with my deals. So that gets down to a time management, scheduling. Maybe it's time to hire an assistant. I got a lot of clients that stopped using transaction coordinators during the recession to save money. And now that they're completely overwhelmed with closings, they forgot about transaction coordinators. And, for $300 or $400 a file when you're operating at that level, how much time can you buy yourself back by doing something like that, right? So your answer can be many things, but time management is almost always part of it. What stands in your way? Well, not having time to actually do my pre-listing package because I'm busy holding deals together. Well, why are you busy holding deals together, doing something that you can pay somebody $400 a file to do for you? Something to talk about with your coach.
Well,
what
but
can
Julie,
you do to eliminate those problems? Go ahead.
There's another side of that too, right? Why don't they get the pre-listing pack done? Because that's a common issue, right? Someone could be coached by one of our coaches for months and procrastinate and drag their feet on the pre-listing pack.
Yeah, what's
and
the real answer to that? I know.
Well,
that's what
the real
saying.
answer to that is because the pre-listing pack is the precursor to doing a lot of the things that you guys have been avoiding doing, and that would be sales skills, learning how to generate listing leads, learning how to actually present on appointments. Some of you are hoping. That's right, learning how to be competitive, accepting the fact that you have to be competitive, and that's okay. And you have to, have a mindset that you're going to start absolutely positively becoming the best salesperson that you can. But here's what's interesting. So some of you, you procrastinate the pre-listing pack. You might change it. You might edit it. You might think, I'm going to make it better. And then we hear from one of our coaches that so-and-so isn't using the pre-listing pack. No wonder they're not getting the results that they otherwise could. Why do you guys do that to yourselves? It's an interesting question. This is more directed towards our existing coaching clients. And the bottom line reason is because you are trying to create excuses not to start doing the things that you perceive are going to cause you pain. And that would be actually, as we just discussed, learning how to become a real honest-to-God salesperson. Maybe you have a mindset issue with being considered a salesperson. Maybe you have a mindset issue with, your willingness to compete, with your willingness to present, with your willingness to have to actually go out there and sell yourself to sellers. Guys, listen, working with buyers is physical labor. And it's mostly, it's friendly stuff. There's not a lot of sales skills involved. Working with sellers requires honest-to-God sales. So here's the thought for all of you. What can you be doing immediately in your business over the next 60 to 90 days to basically make the biggest impact going forward? If there's anything we can be doing for you, what I want you to do is request a free coaching call at freecoachingcallsforagents.com, freecoachingcallsforagents.com. Anything we can ever do for you guys, of course, we'll do it. freecoachingcallsforagents.com. Thanks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Sorry for the couple glitches we had on today's radio show. It's because we had a spike in listeners over the past week, and once again, our technology is playing catch-up. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and if you need us for anything, reach out. Talk with you on the radio tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows, and until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.